Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome back. It's great to be back. I missed you guys a lot last week.
Not as much as we missed you.
No, I mean, I was definitely. It was crazy. I was in Seattle doing some stuff with my son and stuff like that. To going through his conditions and all that stuff. But there's I wanted to. So I really appreciate everybody and all this stuff. And it's great to be back talking hockey. I can say that. Much more fun. Although it was something interesting that happened in Seattle that I wanted to throw out there. First of all, I wanted to get an idea of what kind of hockey city it was like, and that was kind of a cool thing. So I sort of went about talking to people on the streets about that, and I'm going to write an article on that. And I think it's a little different than I expected. So this little teaser is I expected it to be perfect. It's good, but it's not perfect. There's definitely some issues, but we'll see how that plays out. But the one thing I wanted to throw out there that is really fascinating was spending that much time in a place with legalized recreational marijuana. Okay, so I spent I was talking about Seattle. Hey, Peter.
We're no volume and we're live, Peter.
We're live. So Peter lives in the country. Of course, many of you live in a country with recreational. There's plenty in my life in the music world. But there's something fascinating that goes along with legalized marijuana, and it's like the law of unintended consequences. I don't get the sense that people are jerky like they are if they're drunk. Drunk people are worse than high people for sure. If you're just around them.
No, but for a driving perspective, it's the same. Honestly,
from a driving perspective, it's the same. But what I do notice is the thing that marijuana does really well, and of course is used for pain purposes and stuff like that. It really does a good job at numbing you, and that's what that's numbing your senses. Yeah. But with that comes the unintended consequence of like a loss of politeness, which is really kind of an odd thing. I'm serious, and it seems weird, but a subtle thing of if you bump into someone market or whatever, you're like, oh, really sorry. Like among people,
like you were in Boston, even though you were in Seattle because of the rudeness.
And the weird thing is that, because we come from a city that's Philadelphia. That's
everybody's nice in Buffalo,
but Seattle.
As someone who's grew up in Vancouver, know Seattle well, and I've been down there. I was actually in Seattle back in July briefly, and well aware of Washington State's political stance on legalized marijuana. I think one of the things I find interesting about that is, and Vancouver's kind of had the same thing. When you go to places where there's a high influx of people who aren't from there, the vibe changes. And no high influx, right? And that's where I think Seattle is having some effect on things because of its economy and the diversity who's come. There's a lot of people who aren't from there, right?
Yeah.
And stuff. And I think you're bang on. I think all that does is it brings out something that's already lying under the surface. So if you're generally a polite person, but you kind of mask it and stuff, when you're intoxicated on anything, it's going to show your true colors. Right. And I think that's what really happens there. And, Seattle's always been a pretty mellow, laid back place, but there's a lot of people who aren't from Seattle. It's just like Vancouver now. There's a lot of people who simply aren't from there. They live there now, and it's changed the vibe. And I think Seattle's undergoing that in a big way right now.
It is, and I mean, I'm sure that that's the case. But I think there's a definite difference between marijuana and alcohol. Because people are always like, oh, alcohol is way more dangerous, and in some ways, I'm sure it is. I mean, I think driving under the influence of alcohol is more dangerous than driving under the influence of marijuana. Although I say people tell me out there that when people get high, they just drive ridiculously slow, and
which is super dangerous, actually.
Yeah, super dangerous, right?
Super dangerous.
Yeah, it can be. So that's the difference. But with alcohol, I've noticed it's if people are kind of like you say, people are happy, they get happier. If people are sad, they get sadder. Alcohol tends to take you in that direction further either way, For marijuana, it seems to, I mean, and I've never done it, so I can't say, but just from being around people, it seems to just mellow them out. And that's okay. That's cool. And to me, if you're home and you're doing this with your family or whatever, that's fine. No problem. You just hang out.
Yeah, but there's a difference. There's a difference between being mellowed out and then being semi-comatose, which living in the area of the city of Buffalo, which is like a lot of the cafes and sort of the bohemian area of Buffalo. I've encountered people who younger people who I think were under the influence, and they really don't give a crap about anything other than what they're into. And then, but when they get in the way of people who are doing things, they slow things down. It's not a good thing. So I mean, for everybody who's looking at the the legalization going on in Canada as this a panacea that's going to happen in October, I think there's going to be some negatives to it. But
there's going to be some huge negatives, and one of the factors is and we'll use a professional athlete because that's what we're kind of here about, right? We talk about athletes, particularly hockey. If an athlete goes to Canada and say you're on a road trip, so say you do your Western swing, you start in Winnipeg, you go to Edmonton, Calgary, you finish in Vancouver, and in the process, you go and you take some topical cannabis CBD, cannabis oil to use for ailment because it's available there, and you want to try. Customs has to deal with certain
with it, but just remember your business that you work for, including the federal government, it's still illegal to work under the influence, and they test you and other things. So just because it's legal doesn't mean you're not going to get in trouble.
And the thing I have to be cognizant of somebody who travels through Canada a lot and will be going up and down, the QEW to cover the Leafs this season. If I go someplace and it's legalized and some people are smoking like on the patio of a cafe and I'm in there having a cup of coffee and I reek of marijuana on my clothes, which, if you go to a bar and somebody's smoking a cigarette, it's, you smell of tobacco afterwards.
This happened to me in Seattle because I wanted to see what one of these stores was like. And because I'm like, I've never been into something like this. So I walk into it, and I have my
you guess you've never been in a marijuana store, but you had to have gone into a shop back in the day.
Right.
I'm not going to get anything because I've kind of never tried it, never wanted to. But it stunk in there. So then that next morning I'm leaving for the airport and I'm standing in my same backpack and I'm thinking there's going to be then there's sniffer dogs running around. And I'm like, oh man, because my backpack, my wife says that stinks, and I'm like, oh yeah, it really does. They walked right by me. It didn't matter.
But I want to bring up one thing quick, Ek, before we start the show. So Jim the Anvil Neidhart passed away today. I think he was 63.
No.
Yeah, famous for as Peter was Stampede Wrestling out at his neck of the woods, but he'll always be remembered because he was like the over-the-top guy in that tag team. Bret Hart just was the kind of guy who just went about his business and was the technical wrestler, and Jim Anvil was like the muscle guy, but would also act a little crazy at times. Which, again, if you ever watched any reality show that involved Jim the Anvil later in life, which I did a couple on the WWE, he was a little crazy, but he was a likable guy. And Natalia, the current wrestler, that's her dad. So
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
I didn't know that. I mean, I keep abreast of wrestling, not much. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Condolences to her family, but he gave me hours of enjoyment. I'm sure he did for you as well, Peter, and Mike, and maybe Ek.
I didn't wrestle. I wasn't wrestling at all, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the Hart Foundation, and you're right. It's like Bret Hart was the guy. He was the great wrestler. Neidhart was the guy who would put you in a bear hug and choke the life out of you. I mean, he was just big, brawny, strong.
They were the Hart Foundation.
The Hart Foundation. Yeah.
I did go to Bret Hart Elementary School. Not named after
really?
but named after the other.
I mean, I'll tell you this about Bret Hart. He was one of the first interviews I ever did on Sportsology. I got the interview through the Calgary Hitmen because he was a part owner. And actually, so I interviewed him, and it was right after this time in his career, late in his career, that he got a mule kick to the head. And he actually was out from the WWE. And during this interview, he actually told me he was probably going to retire.
Wow.
And I didn't want to break that news because I felt like if he was concussed, I don't want to be the guy to sort of do that. So I let that go, and I just interviewed about the Hitman, and he did it. He actually did I think it was a McDonald's commercial in Canada with Wayne Gretzky, and Wayne Gretzky got in the ring with him. And if you could find this on YouTube, it's pretty funny. And Bret Hart had to teach Wayne Gretzky a little bit about wrestling, and so that was a thrill for him. And so yeah, they're legendary guys, but really, they were fun to watch.
Too bad he didn't do a Jerry the King Lawler Andy Kaufman on Gretzky. That would have been interesting.
Yeah. All right, out here in the East Coast.
This is National Left-Handers Day.
Appreciate your support, and you can do so at patreon.com/hockey. If you really like the show and you want to help the guys out, all the money will go directly to them. So let's keep it going. Patreon.com/hockey. But let's start right into something here, okay? because the Brady Tkachuk signing happens over the weekend.
Yeah.
And this is a big deal and a little surprising. I thought I was a little surprised by it because I was starting to get the indication that he was going to go back to college.
But then I sort of warmed up to the idea that I guess there's so many guys still at BU that at the end of the day, it's the players you play with that's most important. But I guess Ottawa put the full court press on him, which is fine to do.
Yeah.
And so they probably talked about the options. And so now he signed a contract, but that doesn't mean if he doesn't make the team, he goes to the AHL. Now I think it's more likely that he goes to the London Knights, who own his rights. And we saw that Mark Hunter went back to London as a GM over the weekend, which is not a surprise to Mike and myself, even though the rumors were out there for the island. I never believed them. But now you sort of look at the plan, and with Mark Hunter there, that's probably what's going to happen, unless he is miraculous in preseason and makes the team.
You don't think that they promised him a spot on this team?
No.
I think they probably promised him the 9 games, though.
I don't know. I mean, to get him to get
9 games, I think they promised him that.
Well, I think they seriously inferred that he was going to make this team. I will say that much.
Well, if they did that, they misrepresented their stance, because this is an organization that allows these players to develop. They don't rush them along. I mean,
yeah, this is a.
I know, Ak, but I'm just telling you, they didn't rush Thomas Chabot.
Very different,
and they're not going to rush Brady Tkachuk. It's not in their interest to rush him, even if he's ready for the NHL. I mean, a player who, if they send him to London, and remember, Matthew Tkachuk, his older brother, played in London, won a Memorial Cup. That will be a comfortable landing spot for him for a year. Playing against OHL competition, which, in the mind of some, is probably a higher level than U.S. college, but I think that's arguable. But he'll go there, he'll play a year, and then probably be on the Senators next year. And I agree with Russ. I think they'll give him the look, they'll give him the preseason, they'll give him a few games. And if he whets their appetite, then maybe he stays. But I would bet there's it's more than 50-50 that he doesn't go over the 40 games and starts the accrual on his UFA status, and he gets.
This is a team that if they don't have him up, and this team ends up with the worst pick in the draft or whatever, I mean, there's so many reasons that I think they're gonna keep him.
Of the 3 options, I think the least likely is Belleville. I do not think he'll play in the American Hockey League. No, I'm just saying in terms of, and I think that I don't think they want to expose him to like more veteran players in the AHL. I think they would rather have him go and work on his his development and skills.
At the juniors, why would he go? Why I don't see why he would go to juniors and not just stay at Boston if it was going to happen.
Well, I mean, the London Knights treat their organization like a professional team.
I know.
And they have better facilities than most. And what you have to worry about with him going to the AHL is, look, he's not really at his full yet. Going down there, he could be a bit of a target. In the NHL, the guys aren't going to target him, right? Because they'll be playing.
No, I think the AHL is a dangerous place to put him. I agree with that.
So the AHL can be more dangerous to a young developing guy than the NHL, unless you're really up for, like, Clint Costin is a boxer, right? This kid is rock solid muscle. If Brady Tkachuk were that, AHL wouldn't be a problem, but I think it could be a little problem.
Peter, what are your thoughts?
I disagree a little bit with the.
Look at the guys. Like Kyle Connor was already pretty well built. Rantanen was well built. There's very few guys that go down there that are what you would term as, like, not necessarily skinny, but close to that.
Having older guys down there who are looking.
Much that helps in Tkachuk's development. I think if he plays in the OHL, you're not going to have as much worry about that. Plus, he'll play top line minutes with London, and he'll probably go to be in the OHL playoffs, and he'll also play for Team USA in the World Junior in Vancouver. So. If he goes to Ottawa and if he's playing well and playing for the Sens, he probably won't go to the World Junior because they won't want to let him go.
Yeah. To your point, though, Russ, I think the AHL is a chronically underrated league.
Oh, it is.
It is. And I mean, him, I believe, is Patrick Williams. Pat Williams?
Yeah.
Down there, because it will. I mean,
I like it. I like the way he plays. But if Brady makes the NHL with that last name of Tkachuk, there'll be people, making him, ring the bell, here you go. And maybe he doesn't want to do that. And it's a lot to ask an 18-year-old to step up and do that when maybe he doesn't want to do that. That's why I think in terms of long-term development, it's probably going to be better for him to go to the OHL for a year, get stronger, have a really good offensive season, which he will, and then at age 19 come to the NHL.
I just use it as an example. Like, I think the AHL is like the second or third best league in the world. I do. I know other people put the KHL ahead of it, and I don't see how you can. But here's an example. So I'm going to go through, like, let's say Belleville is playing the Chicago Wolves, right?
Right.
Now, the Chicago Wolves is not your normal developing team.
Right.
And their roster is blank on their website. I will get last year's roster. Hold on. That's pretty funny.
Wolves are like an NFL.
Yeah.
They go out there, they sign players, they go out and do a lot of stuff. They have a huge following.
All right, so here's last year's roster. So as an example, let's find some guys here.
That's St. Louis. That's St. Louis's
goon on this roster that's jumping out on me. I will say that for there is, and I'm just not recognizing the name.
It really shocked if he's going to impress them. He gets 9 games. He's going to impress them. I mean, it's not like he's going to be unimpressive compared because he's going to get plenty of time.
You know who their guy is that I don't really know? Paul Thompson. He's a guy that looks like he did a fair amount of fighting, although he scored 24 goals. But see, I mean,
it's not even the
fighting still exists though.
Right. I looked up the Syracuse Crunch, and
Mike, it's also that players are just the older, really dangerous thing to do. I mean, we all saw that a few years back with Eichel getting hurt early in the season. Like there's ways that you can, if you're not smart, you very easily, and if you're
fights.
Yeah. There's a lot more than.
It's a lot.
There's more than the NHL for sure, and I know.
The benefit is it's you go somewhere, you can still dominate. What they're going to tell him is if he doesn't make the team, and he might make the team, and he'll play in preseason. I think he'll play all 9 regular season. But if he doesn't make the team, they're going to say you need to play more games.
Right.
And that's the one advantage you have with the London Knights, because with BU, he wasn't playing as many games. He will play more with London.
If he stays BU, he's locked into BU. He can't do anything else.
But we don't get the same benefit. I kind of wanted your opinions on them and see if you want to add to the list on teams. So I obviously started off with Ottawa, it's pretty obvious. Ottawa's not done. They have more to do. I don't. I still don't buy that Karlsson is going to start the season with them. I really don't. I think they're going to find a way to move him out of there. I don't think he wants anything to do with it, even if they have to go down to a rental price or whatever. And then Carolina was my second team.
Why don't we do them one by one?
We're going to start with Ottawa. So do you guys think Ottawa is done?
I don't think they're done, but they're now that are looking towards camp. And so I don't think there's no urgency. You always talk about this, Act. No deal or negotiation really has to happen right now. And because of that, I think the inaction just sort of makes it like I don't think they're going to make a deal, but I'm not saying they've closed the door.
Peter, go ahead.
No, I just know. I think this is all going to cool off for a while. Putting things on a strategy board and whiteboard and looking at how they can do it. I think they want to see is, can this guy still
are going to want to see a peppy, speedy Karlsson, and if they see that traded or might be traded, the Skinner return the line I got was a deadline return, 3 draft picks. And a 20-year-old in Cliff Poo. That is not what they envisioned in getting for Jeff Skinner. If Ottawa is in a situation where they've got Stone and Duchesne and Karlsson all UFA at the end of this year, now they're going to try to sign some of them, and if they're amenable to it, then they may get it done. But they're going to want to keep these guys as long as possible because they don't have their draft pick. They don't want to. The biggest embarrassment will be that for them to give up, for them to finish 27th or 28th and give Colorado a top 5 pick. So I think, and based on the fact they won't get anything more than a rental price for these guys if they trade them. Even right now, I think they're going to hold on to them until closer to the deadline and get as much as they can for them and be as good a team as possible before the deadline.
But even taking out Carlson from the equation, okay,
why he won't be on the first line.
Right. Probably not. But even if you go to the second line, okay, and what they have is they have Dzingel, Peugeot, and Bobby Ryan. So maybe Dzingel moves up to the first line, right? Maybe he's the left winger. But
there's a difference between not finishing last and being competitive. They are at the bottom of the Atlantic Division. What they're gonna to improve that team means spending money. And Eugene Melnyk will not spend money until there's probably more information about what's going on with that new building. And he met with the mayor of Ottawa in recent days. So maybe there'll be some breakthrough there. But this is a team that's going to penny pinch all this year, and they're going to sell some of their assets for as much as they possibly can get.
Yeah, I know. Let's go to Carolina number 2, okay?
I do want to say, just because if you're wondering what Marian Gabourik's up to, he's been pushing some hockey school, and he did some interviews with Zdeno Chara and other players at this hockey school. So he is staying busy.
Okay. Well, that's good. Good to hear he's staying busy. Second team I have was Carolina. We've talked a lot about Carolina, so we don't spend a whole lot of time on this. But after the Skinner trade, I mean, they lost offense, which is the last thing they needed to lose, right?
Well, they think they're going to replace it with Svechnikov, but the feeling that I get about Carolina, probably a better offer than they got for Skinner for him because he's got another year left in his contract. But more than likely, they're going to hold on to him, probably use him as on their bottom pairing and maybe a bottom pairing plus as a almost $5 million player, and then move him at the deadline when teams who are desperate for defense will be looking to get a defenseman.
I don't think they would use him on the bottom pairing if they kept him. I don't see that point.
Right now it's DeHaan and Hamilton and Slavin and Pesce. That's why I'm saying bottom pairing plus, meaning he'll play power play time. They'll move him up occasionally, but I'll bet you anything he's moving
him now. Like if that is what they're going to do, then there's absolutely no reason. I mean, I have heard over the weekend that they were aggressively trying to move him again after taking some time off.
I'm sure they are aggressively trying to move him, but again, he is a guy that's willing to eat money, if any at all. I don't know if they've eaten any money on any deal yet, right?
No,
not yet. I mean,
that's the point.
And the Skinner dumped $6 million in salary in that deal.
I think the Falk market is dead until the deadline. Based on nobody wants to pay him at the regular season, they'll pay a prorated rate for him.
I mean, I think there are teams that would trade for him right now, but they would give basically the same type of deal, futures,
depending on his whole contract. Yeah,
right. And then they're probably thinking, okay, we're going to get a top prospect and a first round pick. They're not going to get that now. Maybe they'll get that. Maybe they'll get that in late February when a team who thinks they have a chance to win the Stanley Cup is willing to take that chance. And he's got another year on the deal, so it's not a rental. It's an extended rental.
Right. All right. Next up, I get Peter's opinion on this one too. Montreal. Okay. Montreal is my third team that is not close to being done. And this is a team, that obviously still has to move Pacioretty. That has to happen.
We say it, but
no way around it. And, and it's like, and Pacioretty does sound depressed. Like when you hear him talk, I mean, he's really taken this. They've got to move him. It's funny because last year I heard a lot of that behind the scenes stuff that Pacioretty was really pissed off about the fact that he wasn't being moved and that the way it was getting played and the whole 9 yards. To the point at the deadline where I was saying, other people they have to move him, which seemed bizarre, that they had to move him.
Wait. Alan Walsh has on his Twitter feed a quote from Max Pacioretty, which doesn't sound depressed. The support I've received from Montreal fans this summer has warmed my heart. That doesn't sound depressing.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. I've been blocked by the guy.
Yeah, no, but I saw that quote too, and yeah, I'm blocked by him too, which is nice.
I just feel the love.
Yes, Alan has a lot of that to get. But yeah,
I wonder if he's a lefty.
No, his heart needs to be warmed. He needs to be getting support from his fans. I mean, that's like
that sounds.
None of you read it. You name the oldest forward that, Mike, and this goes to your point. Like I've been working on another thing that I can get some advice here. Maybe anyone in the comments can tell or as well. of what is an NHL prime these days. Like, what do you consider it? You know? Is it?
I think it's different per position.
Position matters.
All right,
Yeah, I think it's different per position.
What's a forward in his prime year? I think you can definitely go into. I think I was going to. To me, it was a
top line player if he's playing the wing. They're intending to put him at center again. If he's playing center, I don't think he's a top line center in the NHL. I think he's a second line center. He's not big. He's not particularly good defensively. He's very gifted offensively, but I think he's a number 2 in the NHL. He is never going to be a number 1 center.
Because here's the weird thing about thinking, and I don't know that I totally agree with that, but I don't, possibly 23. De La Rose is 23. Matthew Peck, who they signed, is 25, right? Hudon is 24. And De La Rey is 20. The fact that these are guys.
They're weak up the middle. I think that's a statement on the desperation of the Montreal Canadiens organization right now and Marc Bergevin to not fall flat in their face. And I think that won't be the best thing for him unless he is otherworldly as an 18-year-old. And it would be tough for me to believe that he can step right in the NHL and be an effective impact player because, I think he's going to be a good player, but there are not many 18-year-olds who can step in center, Austin Matthews and Jack Eichel and Connor McDavid. I don't know if Kotkaniemi is in that group, and I think they would be better off letting him develop for a year or two instead of rushing him.
In Muncher, well, then they've got to buy time for Kotkaniemi to get ready for the NHL because he's likely not there yet. So this is probably the best way to do it. But you've only done it on one side of one end of the roster.
Yeah,
you've still got a goalie and your defense that are basically, they're getting into senior citizen territory. Weber's 32, Petrie's 30, Schlemko 31, Ben 31,
and Weber
31.
And Weber's going to be out until January. This was it labrum?
Yeah. So you walk away and you say, I've got to recalibrate how I'm going to play this game.
Well, Peter, the one more thing that I look at Montreal and you look at where they are and the talent, what they have on that team. And even if they wanted to rebuild, even if they're not say strip it down, but if they, okay, we're going to play the youngsters. And when you do that, you're not going to be as good, but we're getting something out of the end of it in terms of they'll get experience and whatever. And we'll get a top draft pick. But the problem is you've got Carey Price there and he prevents them being bad enough to get a top draft pick. They will be middle of the road because Carey Price will stand on his head. They won't be good enough to make the playoffs, but they won't be good enough they won't be bad enough to finish last. They're in that middle of the road mediocrity level that Toronto was in for years. And that sucks because, you can't really do what you want to when you're too good or too bad, when you're in the middle.
You know what?
Here's something I've been searching. It doesn't say yet whether Ryan Poehling has definitely agreed to go back to St. Cloud. And he was just at the summer showcase. He was almost a point a game in college. He is a center.
Yeah.
That is a possibility that they're going to give him a long look now.
Yeah. He's a year ahead of Kotkaniemi, so that would make sense.
He has to make a decision soon, but we might see him in camp.
Yeah.
They might have him hang around a bit.
Well, this is what you're going to have to do. If you're Montreal to really, to make some way, and especially if you're going to get at least bring in speedy players like these guys are, bring in speed players because that at least that way. That is definitely the effect that the Vegas Knights had on the NHL. From talking to people right now is the fact that everybody, if you're not super fast, you've got have issues like that's.
And what that means?
Super fast players all over. Simon Praise in there on a tryout, right?
Right, but he's coming off. He was out for over a year.
It helps certain teams.
Yeah, and they may go that route because they got plenty of money.
They still have a chance there. My fourth team was the New York Rangers. Okay, so this is the fourth.
Well, but they did nothing major in free agency act. They bought in. I think the organization and Gorton bought in. I want to get Russ's thought. They bought into this rebuild. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to last on time, but it could last a while.
Yeah.
I think it'll last if in this offseason they can't get Carlson and or Panarin signed, then it will last. I don't think it will last. Those guys is willing to sign with the Rangers. But here, if we look at them defensively, Shea, Shattenkirk, Stahl, D'Angelo, Gilmore, Pionk, You might throw in Brendan Smith if all of a sudden the 15 pounds lost is good again. So they're not doing anything defensively, right?
Yeah, defensively
offensively, on the fourth line, sure, there's room for a left winger, but I mean, like, that's Cody McLeod's spot. Even though roster resource doesn't want to admit it, and I'll admit it, there's room for a left winger, but I mean, like, that's Cody McLeod's spot. Even though roster resource doesn't want to admit it, and I'll admit it for him. It's
you tell me.
Cody McLeod's spot. So they really, I don't think they're going to do what
Kevin Hayes do a 1-year deal, but I'm not sure how much the Rangers wanted to buy in long term on Kevin Hayes, and now they have an asset that maybe at the deadline, if somebody's looking for a big forward, that's somebody that they can flip and get draft picks and prospects for.
I mean, Rangers top line, you could go with Kreider, Zibanejad, Zuccarello. Second line, that's where I think you're going to see at least Cheadle, maybe Cheadle and Anderson. Spooner, I think Spooner and Nemestikov, and I think you're going to see – I don't know if you're going to see Kevin Hayes as a center this year. Probably not.
Yeah.
I think that's going to remove the glut, and I think VC will get moved to the fourth line, and I think Hayes will be on the third line with Fast, and I think that's how you're looking for their top 9, and then the fourth line will get rotated around with guys like Cody McLeod, and I think that's how it's going to go.
It makes sense. I think that they have, to me they are. I mean, they don't
have one of these studs that we're talking about, like Panarin or Carlson, percentage chance at the top pick with Lundqvist. It won't be great. And the Rangers have never had the first overall pick, so they're not really worried about it.
Yeah, right.
They never have.
That's interesting. That's fascinating. I mean, they get
sign them because I think both of them are going to market. Unless Panarin gets traded to some place like with a nice beach, like San Jose, or goes to Brooklyn or something like that. More than likely he's going to hit the market. And I think Carlson, no matter where he gets traded, unless he absolutely loves it, he's going to go to July 1st and try to beat Drew Doughty's $11 million AAV on a new deal.
Yeah. My next team would be
limping, very slow Erik Karlsson, who might only get like 65 points this year. So that's
Russ, I'm just saying that the concern is out there. I'm not saying that's
he had no less points than the year before. And no one to play with.
God, it's out there. I'm not.
Now, there could be some say it's Pacioretty is their goal. I don't think that's really their target. I still think Panarin is in there, and because I've talked to somebody who has been a very good source of mine for years in Chicago that says Panarin is very much on their radar.
How many more times can Chicago go to the well? Because if it's Panarin, they're renting him for a year because they traded him because they couldn't sign him, and they know that they couldn't sign him, and they got Saad who gave him cost certainty. How many times are they going to? How many more times can they trade young prospects and draft picks for a guy who's going to walk away?
They still have a deep system, so they could do it if they want.
Okay,
it's not as deep as it used to be, but it's still pretty good.
And with the salary cap going up, who's to say they couldn't now sign him? They couldn't then, but maybe they can now. And they've got.
I don't think they're going to want to, though. I don't think they'll do it.
Yeah, it's a big question. I mean, what are your thoughts, Peter?
Chicago is such an enigma because they have 4 huge. It's hamstrung them to a certain degree. I mean, you got to give Stan Bowman credit. He has done almost everything possible to deal with his cap situation and problems.
Yeah.
And he's done a remarkable job of just making anything happen. But I think he's just run out of room. Yeah. And until you actually look at trading a Taser, a Kane, and eating some of that salary to make it palatable for the acquiring team, he doesn't really have much more to play. And, the legacy of those guys, here's the interesting thing. When it was kind of obvious that they just the team or the team or the quote unquote dynasty had kind of run out of steam. Mm-hmm. That's where you take the goodwill of 3 Stanley Cup wins and whatever it was, 5 years or 6 years, and you leverage that out as you try and go down and regroup. Yeah. And that's probably the mistake they didn't make, was all that goodwill from 3 championships and say we've got to deal with this, whether it's buyout Seabrook, something like that, and then start restocking the cupboard.
I will tell you,
that's what they should have done, but it's easy to say that in hindsight, right?
No, it is. The goodwill is gone in Chicago. Like, I know Chicago fans, and they are a little frustrated. And nobody should of the times that they've had, but I'm just saying, if you're a fan now, you are sort of frustrated based on the way cap is, and it's too bad. Here's the thing, though, where they may have to make another move is goaltending, because if Corey Crawford can't start the season, are you really going with Cam Ward and Anton Forsberg? If you are, you have no chance at the playoffs. The playoffs are done.
And I also think that more than forward, because if you look at their forwards, you can piece together a top six with Saad and Taves on line, and maybe DeBrincat, Anisimov, and Kane on a second line. I think there's enough offense there that they can forge through. You cannot win with Connor Murphy as your number 3 defenseman. They need somebody to replace Yarmulson. After they traded him, they had nobody. Connor Murphy is, I think, a bottom pairing guy at best. And, that's why they might be in on Falk, or they might be in on a couple of other defensemen. But if they're going to make a major move, I think they have to get another blue liner, because Seabrook is not the same guy, and Keith is a little long in the tooth, but he's still effective. But they need some help on the blue line.
Yeah.
Talk slower, guys, because it seems like people in Canada are having trouble with the feed. Basically, Cousin Eddie said that if you picture what Fred Flintstone would have as far as Wi-Fi, with like a dinosaur running it for him, that's what he's got going. He lives somewhere remote.
I'm really sorry. We'll talk.
So we should talk slower.
Legalized marijuana up there in Canada too. That could be the problem. They're just hearing us slower than we are. So two other teams basically that they throw in. The first being the New York Islanders. So, and then another team that I was bordering on, but I know that since Peter's on here, I want to talk about the Vancouver Canucks, whether or not they're actually done or not, because that's a tough one. To me, let's start with Vancouver. So Vancouver is obviously they went out, they made some interesting moves. Interesting
means
signing Roussel and Beagle, going out and getting 2 free agents,
stupid moves.
Their third line, right? Essentially, 2 third line players. That was surprising to some people, but they've drafted so well recently that they have such a great system. But those players, I mean, you might see Peterson. You're going to see Peterson this year, probably, right? So that's for the most part. So I don't know. What do you think, Peter? Are they done?
Yeah, I think they're done. I don't know what else they could do that's not throwing good money after bad already.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I could see them really doing is perhaps making a trade later on in the season, because they've fallen so far out of it that they might as well get something for someone.
Right.
And even still, that player would probably end up being his name so many times. I just don't know if he starts off strong and plays well for a while.
Yeah.
That's your point to strike if you really believe you're moving on,
right.
Because you got to capitalize. Well, he's still got term left and value, and that would be it. But I don't see them coming in and doing anything significant other than the standard odd PTO here or there. I mean, they are what they are, which is a very bizarrely built team.
I mean, Jake Virtanen, they just signed for 2 more years, right? Right. It's gonna be up there, right?
Where he his game.
Yeah.
Like he's sort of figuring out how he's got to play. And the team is understanding that maybe Jake Virtanen isn't quite what we thought we were getting in him, and we have to use him another way. If Virtanen does, takes a small step and increases where he is, that's a good thing. But the Canucks just have a lot of holes.
Right.
that are sort of filled with players that aren't that great.
Right.
Here's the thing, though. You could add 70 points in a rookie year, be a Calder candidate, and make Sven Baertschi and Marcus Granlund look even better. If that happens, they will be one of those borderline playoff teams if they get decent goaltending.
And then if Brandon Sutter would be a third line center, which is where he belongs.
Yeah.
But he's out in cap space. You have not heard the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, we know that right now they're at an impasse in terms of that defenseman, and maybe that's not going to happen until the deadline, because I'm sure right now if there's a team looking, if say Carolina is shopping Falk, they're asking for Kapanen and probably a first round pick or something like that, and that might be what Kyle Dubas doesn't want to do, but I think eventually they're going to have to pay that price. But and Russ, I want to get your. I know he his career is in limbo right now. I just get the weird feeling with all that money available, and when they sign Nylander, it's if it's a bridge or an extension, they could still have $8 to $10 million in cap space depending on what type of contract they sign at Nylander too. I have this weird feeling you're going to see you could, if he's healthy enough, you're going to see the Leafs go towards Nash.
Yeah, I definitely could see it. I don't know where Rick Nash's head is at right this moment. Like we haven't heard from him since he decided to pull himself out of the free agent race. And let's be real about this. I think he did that because he wasn't getting the offers, and that's fair. Right. I mean, everybody said, "Oh, there was a lot of interest." There may have been a lot of interest, but it was probably cheap interest.
Right.
And so the problem with this, Mike, is if he comes, he ain't coming that cheap because it's but this is, again, you will be over. This is your classic Leafs overpayment, except Rick Nash can still be an effective player, just not a big-time scorer. But it is going to be a classic Leafs overpayment if it happens.
Yeah, no, I mean,
who cares if it's an overpayment if it's only for 1 year?
Right, and that's the thing. They have this window where they have conceivably $10 million in cap space, and prorated, they would, even if they sign Nash for say $4 to $5 million on a 1-year deal, they would still have enough money to make a move for a defenseman at the deadline. So I don't think I think the whole scenario fits well in the sense that they can pay Nash a competitive rate for a 1-year deal.
I think that would be one of the top places for him. I felt that for a couple of years with Babcock, Lycan, and everything else. But now they've had a change at the helm, and we don't know what Kyle Dubas thinks of him. That's really the big thing here. Is that could be the part that could really make this not happen. Just he might be like, hey, look, I get that he could be a 1-year plug here, but that's not what we want to do. We want to give such and such ice time, whoever that might be.
Andreas Janssen.
So let's just take the idea out that maybe, he's not necessarily on the radar for the Leafs right at the beginning, but now you're sitting here and you're like, maybe Kyle Dubas has sat there. He's tried to make some moves to shore up his defense. What we know right now with the Leafs is that you're going to run Tavares, Matthews, and Kadri down the middle.
Right.
And now you have the three highest scoring centers by goals. Like that three, there's no other trio of centers that scored that many goals in the league last year. Mm-hmm. You're going to pressure every team to manage that. That's the strategy. Why not bring Nash in and use him as the defensive side of the game that he is? Don't pay him for goals, overpay him to do the stuff that he became better at as his career got on when the goals dried up.
Role would be.
If you can't get your top four right-handed defensemen to solve problems, make it even harder on the forwards so that anytime you roll out a line there, other than your fourth line to give a breather to the few guys, any team is going to be sitting there going, mother pecker, I've got to deal with this again. And that's not a bad strategy given the situation for 1 year.
Right after the signing of Tavares, Babcock came out and said, well, my top two lines are going to be 2 days into training camp, he could change his mind. But he said after Tavares, he said the top line would be Marleau with Matthews and Nylander. And the number 2 line would be Zach Hyman with Tavares and Marner. Now, I like Zach Hyman, and I was all for him playing with Matthews because he's a responsible two-way guy and he digs out the puck and he's a really good player. But if you're going to set up a checking line, if you signed Nash and put him with Tavares and Marner, you would have a checking line of Zach Hyman, Nazem Kadri, and probably Connor Brown. That's, I think, one of the better checking lines in the NHL. If they fit Nash in there as basically a JVR replacement, and he won't score as many goals, but I think if he played with Tavares or Matthews, he would probably score 20 to 25. I think that's a home run. And I think if they have that empty cap space and he is going to try to come back, I could see Toronto going that way.
You know what? Toronto may go that way. I'm going to tell you a team that I think is going to reach out for him. And when he was deciding what teams he would like to be traded to, the Boston Bruins were always one of those teams.
Yeah.
Listen to left wingers on the Boston Bruins after Marchand. You've got Sean Corrali, Joachim Nordstrom, Anders Borg, Danton Heinen, and Jake DeBrusk. Like, there's a spot for Rick Nash on that team. If you think about it, especially if they feel like they're a left wing away from being a real cup contender,
sure,
they may look at their team in camp and say, let's use this little bit of cap space we have and try and lure Rick Nash here.
Based on the way DeBrusk played in the playoffs and late and almost throughout the season, I think he could be a top six winger for the Bruins.
Right, it's the bottom. It's third and fourth line.
Yeah,
you know, that's where you're looking at the guys that they have for left wing and say, okay, look, even if you want to slate in Anders Bjork for something, you could always move him to the right side. Between Nordstrom and Corrali, those guys don't have to play full time. Danton Heinen, between those three, they don't all have to play full time. Matter of fact, you probably don't want them to.
Yeah, and just to touch on quickly before we end the show, when X said the Islanders, I mean, I think there's a want there to sort of respond to the loss of Tavares, and Lou Lamoriello is as seasoned a general manager as it comes, and he makes smart moves. But I'm wondering how desperate the ownership there is to make some sort of big move to sort of counter the loss of Tavares, and that might force Lou into something he may not want to do.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I mean, Peter, what do you think? I mean, do you think he can fight off ownership if ownership's saying we got to respond here?
Maybe. I think it's too early.
Here's the thing about the Islanders. They have the best management team going now. They do. If you go look at them from coach through their GM, through their other coaches, you would look at that and say, wow, that has the makings of a Stanley Cup team until you look at the roster.
Right.
Like that's the part where if you're letting Lou move at Lou's pace, which it does seem like ownership is doing,
right,
it's not happening for them this year.
Right. And the one thing though is that Lou is not sentimental. So because those players are there, I mean, he will try to get Anders Lee signed. There are a couple other UFAs. He'll try to get them signed because they're good players. But if he can't get them signed, he's going to move them. He will not, like, oh, this guy's been in the organization for 4 or 5. It doesn't matter. Like, if he sees a deal that'll help the team going forward, he'll make it. He's sort of Machiavellian in that respect.
So, I mean, look, they're going to go into camp and they're going to hope that Hosang can make the team. Maybe Dal Cole looks a little faster. They're going to go with and burn out all those possible options because right now that's what Lou looks like he wants to do. Yeah. Next year, will he be more of a player in free agency? Yeah, I think they will be. This will also give the Islanders a chance at Jack Hughes. Why not? Because, again, it doesn't really matter what you do to this Islanders roster. I don't think you're making them into a playoff team with that goaltending no matter what happens. Right. And the defense definitely weakened. And goal scoring is going to be down. And Matt Barzal is a terrific player. His points will be down without John Tavares. Like, that's going to happen.
And I think it was on the weekend or a few days before when somebody said, somebody tweeted you and I asking what the package would be going back to Columbus if they were trying to trade for Panarin. And I said, it would have to be a top young forward who made the NHL. And I think a guy like Beauvillier would fit that description. And a top prospect, which would maybe be a Wallstrom or a Dobson, and probably another a conditional pick, a conditional first. Re-sign him. Why would you do that if you're the Islanders and Lou Lamoriello if Panarin is going to be on the market next July? Why don't keep your assets?
Right, and that's why they probably won't do it. The other thing is, with Barzal as a 1C now, everything that Tavares used to have to shoulder, he's going to have to at a very young age.
Yeah.
So this is another developmental year for him where he's got to go up against Sidney Crosby. He's going to have to go up against Matthews. Or Tavares. He meant Tavares. He's going to have to go up against some pretty great 1Cs and have to win those battles to get his points now. It's not going to be as easy. He'll get a fair amount. Don't get me wrong. But I don't think he's getting 75 points. No.
Okay, guys, good show. We'll be back tomorrow. I think we'll have Kevin Allen tomorrow, but I'm waiting for a response from him. But update everybody tomorrow morning. For Eck, for Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. Remember, it's National Lefties Day.
Yeah.
remember, without the buzz.